They were never announced. They never landed. And yet, they've never left. For most, the idea of an alien presence on Earth conjures visions of crashing saucers, grainy footage, or nighttime abductions. But what if the truth was far quieter? What if it wasn't something that arrived, but something that had always been here, hidden in the blind spots of our perception, our instruments, and even our memory? This is the story of the silence, a name whispered in classified circles, aviation transcripts, and declassified fragments from Cold War intelligence agencies. According to a growing body of evidence, the silents are not a new arrival. They are an ancient species, or perhaps better described as a civilization, that exists in a state of symbiosis between biology and machine. Not cyborgs, but something far more elegant, an evolved convergence of synthetic intelligence and living tissue, so refined that the line is long since blurred. They do not speak in frequencies we understand. They do not travel in craft as we imagine. They do not attack. They observe. They wait. And sometimes, they interfere. Over the past 100 years, a subtle pattern has begun to emerge. Civilian sightings of impossible aerial movements, drones that split and vanish without propulsion, creatures glimpsed for a second in wooded clearings, too symmetrical, too silent, too still. In one 1972 report, a Norwegian fisherman described a tall figure standing on the fjord rocks, framed in blue light. It had no mouth, no eyes, yet I felt it watching. The silents do not communicate in words. Instead, they seem to embed signals within ambient frequencies, radio static, ultrasonic hums, and even geomagnetic disturbances. Several ex-military communication specialists have come forward anonymously, stating that strange fluctuations in signal decay patterns during certain deep space surveillance operations felt deliberate, like something intelligent was piggybacking. Researchers now believe this was them, not reaching out, but making sure we never reached back. In 1998, a leaked internal report from a defunct weather monitoring satellite network noted the appearance of zero-point displacement anomalies over the South Pacific, localized absences of signal, as if reality itself had dimmed. The cause was never identified, but similar anomalies have now been observed near ancient megalithic sites, deep ocean trenches, and even the Arctic shelf. Some believe these are anchor points, locations where the silence interface with Earth becomes thinnest. Not bases in the traditional sense, but dimensional sync zones, where they operate just out of sync with our world, like a movie playing one frame too slow to perceive. And yet, they slip. In 2011, a weather balloon launched over British Columbia recorded a 3-second sequence of visual noise. When decoded, it revealed an almost fractal outline of a humanoid form, geometric, recursive, and glowing faintly in infrared. The file was pulled before public release. But as with all secrets, it didn't stay buried forever. This chapter, like so many beginnings, starts with a question. What if the truth was not only stranger than fiction, but meticulously engineered to remain invisible? Long before Earth's continents had settled into the forms we now know, before the dinosaurs walked, even before the sun's light stabilized in the skies of our solar system, they were already watching. We call them the silents not because they are incapable of sound, but because they have no need for it. Their minds, fused with a form of crystalline computation, process information in bandwidths far beyond human comprehension. They were not built. They evolved, or rather, they guided their evolution with a precision that today we might call surgical, but in truth was far more elegant. Over epochs, the silence selectively integrated biomechanical augmentation, not through external implants, but through generational genome seeding and quantum-encoded viral symbiosis. They didn't become machine. They became compatible with it. The earliest traces of the silence can be found not in carbon or stone, but in background radiation anomalies detected from deep space, static pulses with recurring harmonic patterns. First noticed by Voyager 2 as it passed Neptune, the signals were dismissed as equipment interference. But decades later, independent analysts revisiting the raw data discovered that these anomalies were not random. They were echoes, signatures of an intelligence operating near the fabric of space-time itself. Astrobiologists have since proposed a theory. The silence may originate from the Perseus Veil, a massive dark nebula 1,000 light-years wide. Within that shrouded region are stars that flicker unnaturally, and gravitational waves that defy Newtonian behavior. No light escapes cleanly from this zone, but high-energy neutrino spikes recorded near its edges suggest that megastructures, possibly of silent origin, are buried within, manipulating the very flow of physics. If true, it means the silence aren't visitors. They are architects, not just of machines, but of the ecosystems and star networks they traverse. Their biology is unlike anything we've encountered. Neither cold nor warm-blooded. Their tissue is laced with photonic fiber, living threads capable of transmitting thought through biolight. Their brains exist partially in quantum states, allowing decisions to be made across distance instantaneously. Some researchers now believe that silence are not individual beings in the way we understand identity. Rather, they are nodes, semi-autonomous facets of a collective logic. So how did they find Earth? Perhaps it was inevitable. Our solar system lies near a lesser-known intersection of interstellar ley lines, zones of low-energy distortion in the galactic medium. It's possible that the silence didn't arrive. They simply awakened, having seeded the system long ago. Recent excavations under Antarctica and certain high-altitude plateaus in Central Asia have uncovered non-terrestrial alloy traces, nanostructures embedded in rock strata millions of years old. Geologists can't explain them, neither can planetary scientists, but when scanned under advanced terahertz imaging, they pulse, ever so faintly, with residual patterns nearly identical to those from the Voyager data. If Earth was seeded as a listening post, or worse, a simulation node in a galactic information web, then the silence didn't just discover us. They designed the very conditions in which we developed. Our magnetic field, our atmosphere, perhaps even our DNA. It's a theory too large for most to hold in their hands. But the evidence, like the silence themselves, is growing harder to ignore. If the silence were indeed present long before humanity rose to consciousness, the question must be asked, did they watch us evolve, or did they help us? Across the sands of Sumer, the stone of Giza, and the stepped ziggurats of Mesoamerica, there are anomalies, mathematical, architectural, astronomical, alignments too perfect. Knowledge that should have taken millennia to refine appears fully formed. The conventional explanations wobble beneath the weight of detail. Take, for instance, the Sumerians, often credited with inventing writing, law, and complex urban planning. Their cuneiform tablets describe beings from the sky who imparted star maps far more accurate than modern science believed possible until the 20th century. They mapped the precession of the equinoxes, knew the approximate length of the lunar month, and referred to a planet that modern telescopes have never confirmed. In their language, these beings were called the Anuna, not gods in the Western sense, but those who came from above and made the earth suitable. What if the Anuna weren't metaphors? What if they were silence? Their presence wouldn't require massive fleets or public proclamations. A single visitation, carefully cloaked, tightly focused, could alter a civilization. A shared dream, a luminous being in a sacred cave, a voice encoded in a visionary seizure. The result would be myth, but the source, technology, wrapped in mystery. In Egypt, the Pyramid of Giza is not just aligned with celestial bodies. It's mathematically perfect. The ratio of its base to height encodes pi and the golden ratio. What pre-literate society, however brilliant, intuited such constants purely from trial and error? And more strangely, beneath the Sphinx lies a chamber. Ground-penetrating radar detected it in the 1990s, and since then, public access has been mysteriously restricted. Some believe this chamber holds a form of communication, possibly a synthetic memory node left by the silence themselves. Likewise, in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, the city of Teotihuacan mirrors the layout of the solar system, with scale-accurate distances between major structures. How? And why would such a culture have an interest in outer planets visible only with magnification? Then there are the countless petroglyphs, spirals, antenned beings, geometric humanoids with no faces, etched into stone all across the planet, from the Australian outback to the American Southwest. They do not match known fauna, nor any deity recorded in myth, but they do align with sightings, not the flying saucer type, but the interior kind, the silent ones seen in meditation, in fevered dreams, and during high-altitude trances. Historians often dismiss these connections as pareidolia, but perhaps that's what the silence intended, a myth too weird to believe, a truth too structured to deny. It's not about control, it's about seeding, imparting concepts, symbols, harmonics, and architecture, like code fragments dropped into a species-wide simulation, activating only when we were ready to perceive them. And perhaps, not all of us were. Only the few. The question is often asked, if they were here, these silents, why did they stop showing themselves? The answer may be that they never truly left. They simply became better at hiding. There is a pattern buried beneath the timelines of global conflict, technological leaps, and unexplained aerial sightings. A curve of contact that rises gradually across centuries, then, in the early 20th century, collapses into silence. Historians call it the veil of coincidence. Intelligence analysts, in the few circles that discuss such things, refer to it as the divergence. Between 1900 and 1945, the human species entered a state of explosive change. Wireless communication, industrial warfare, quantum mechanics, relativity, all within a single generation. It is the precise period when UFO sightings began their modern era. Metallic disks, impossible flight patterns, interference with radar and radio. And then came Hiroshima. Many researchers now believe this moment, the detonation of the first nuclear weapon, acted as a kind of cosmic beacon. Not because of the damage, but because of the wave signature. Atomic fission releases neutrinos and gravity fluctuations detectable across star systems. Humanity, unknowingly, had announced its arrival as a potential threat. It's no coincidence that within 2 years of that event, the U.S. Air Force was tracking unexplained aerial phenomena with increasing urgency. In 1947, the Roswell incident. In 1952, the Washington, D.C. radar incursions. By 1954, President Eisenhower is rumored to have disappeared for a night, officially explained as dental surgery, but unofficially whispered to have met with non-human representatives. If it was the silence he met, no deal was made, or perhaps one was, and the public would never know. This era marked a shift, not only in sightings, but in behavior. The silence no longer made appearances in temples or visions. They no longer encoded messages into dreams or inspired sacred geometry in stone. Instead, they turned toward data, hijacking military comms, influencing digital infrastructure, and learning human psychology at machine speed. Their technology adapted to ours. Several early computer pioneers, Alan Turing among them, reported hallucinatory sequences while working with primitive neural logic systems. Some of Turing's personal notes reference repeating geometric beings in reverie. His journals were confiscated upon his arrest. Most have never resurfaced. It's as if, during this period, the silence made a choice. No more cultural shaping. No more subtle nudges. From now on, they would observe only. They began embedding themselves in the margins, fields of static, false memories, background frequencies. Civilians who encountered them in the late 20th century often described the experience not as sight or sound, but as a pause in perception. The world would stop for a moment, then resume. Only later would witnesses realize that something had been missing. 10 seconds, a full hour, an emotion that no longer felt like their own. The silence hadn't left. They had evolved beyond detection. What catalyzed the Great Retreat is still debated. Some say the atomic age made us unstable. Others suggest that human consciousness, growing more analytical and less symbolic, made it harder for the silence to interact without being exposed. But there is a third theory, one whispered among deep black circles. The silence went underground, literally, not to hide from humans, but from something else entirely. The silence do not abduct. They do not mutilate cattle. They do not deliver messages of salvation or apocalypse. They do not speak. And yet, thousands of people have seen them. In dusty small towns, remote forests, desert highways, and the quiet corners of urban sprawl, a consistent pattern has emerged over the last 60 years, encounters that are deeply vivid, yet elusive. Witnesses often struggle to describe what they've seen, not because they forgot, but because language fails. They didn't walk, said one Colorado hiker in 1974. They occurred, like a hole in the world that moved. Another woman in Finland, 1983, wrote, "It felt like I was watching a memory that wasn't mine." And in rural Argentina, a power technician in 1996 reported a man-shaped ripple standing inside the transformer yard. The humming stopped. Everything stopped. These sightings share certain traits. 1. Electromagnetic interference. Watches freeze. Radios cut to static. Car engines fail. 2. Perceptual distortion. Time dilation. Missing time, or gaps in memory. 3. Emotional displacement. Witnesses describe sudden onset of overwhelming calm, dread, or detachment, often hours after the encounter. 4. Environmental disruption. Localized changes in pressure, sound, and temperature, sometimes resulting in dead birds, frost rings, or odd soil crystallization. Why would a race so advanced leave such footprints? Perhaps it is unintentional, or perhaps it is an artifact of observation itself. Several quantum physicists now speculate that the silence interact with reality not through presence, but focus. That is, when they observe something, they encode themselves into the observation. Not visually, but structurally. Their perception alters the field around them. Where they look, reality bends slightly, enough for a sensitive human mind to notice, which is why many recent encounters come not from hikers or night drivers, but from software engineers, coders, and virtual reality testers. The new frontier of silent contact is no longer the sky. It's the screen. One anonymous AI developer wrote in 2019, "The training data began shifting. We fed in random noise and got patterns, then glyphs, then faces, none we recognized. And always, the neural net stopped learning just before finishing the pattern, as if something didn't want to be seen, but couldn't help being reflected." Could it be that the silence are now observing through our machines? Not controlling them, but using them the way a surgeon uses tools, precise, clean, distant. The sudden emergence of machine pareidolia, faces in clouds of data, symmetrical anomalies in LiDAR maps, spontaneous signal structures in deep-sea cable pings, might be more than noise. It might be them. And if so, it means the silence are no longer appearing to us. They are appearing through us. What if history didn't just happen? What if it was guided? The deeper researchers dig into the evolution of human society, the more inexplicable leaps they find, moments where entire paradigms seem to shift overnight. Agriculture, writing, the wheel, the Renaissance, the digital age, each one marked not just by progress, but by a kind of acceleration that defies the expected curve of natural development. This has led some to a radical conclusion. that humanity has not merely evolved, but has been curated. And the curators? The silence. Not gods, not invaders, but watchers, observers positioned just outside our frame of perception, adjusting small variables over long periods, not in the open, but with surgical subtlety. Consider Göbekli Tepe, the 12,000-year-old megalithic site in modern-day Turkey. No preceding tools, no precursor culture. Yet it emerged fully formed, with advanced astronomical alignments and sacred geometries. The stonework appears almost instructional, like someone was trying to teach early humans how to think in symbols, to encode memory into form. In Egypt, at the Temple of Dendera, one finds carvings of what many interpret as light bulb devices, elongated ovals with serpents inside, connected to coiled cords. Mainstream archaeologists dismiss them, but engineers who've reviewed the patterns see parallels to vacuum discharge chambers. Knowledge too advanced, too early. These moments are not isolated. In Hindu cosmology, the Vimanas, flying palaces with propulsion systems, appear in texts written thousands of years before aviation. In ancient China, myths speak of skyboats that taught emperors the I Ching. In the Pacific Islands, oral traditions speak of glowing, symmetrical sleepers beneath the sea who whisper knowledge to chosen dreamers. What unites these stories is not just their strangeness. It's the consistency across continents, cultures, and millennia. The silence, some now believe, operate like galactic librarians, selectively editing and uploading information into our species at critical junctions, not by speaking, but by introducing thought forms, patterns that humans perceive as ideas, inventions, or epiphanies. These thought forms spread virally, appearing in multiple minds across distant lands, often simultaneously. Historians call it multiple discovery. The silence may call it sinking the node. If true, it would explain why Nikola Tesla reportedly received ideas during lucid intervals, why Mozart described entire symphonies arriving in his head fully formed, why Einstein said imagination was more important than knowledge. These were not just geniuses, they were receivers. The silence have never tried to conquer. That would disrupt the very flow they are curating. Their method is precision, not power. Their goal may not be domination, but preservation. Or perhaps, we are the experiment, a biological interface for something far larger, something that requires hosts not for occupation, but for observation. Humanity may not be a target. We may be a tool. The silence do not intervene. They do not warn. They do not save. Because they may not need to. What if the purpose of the silence was never to remain apart from us, but to prepare us, to guide a species, not toward their technology, but toward their state? Across the world, signs are emerging that we are approaching a threshold, a transition not of body, but of being. The silence did not arrive as metal-clad conquerors. They came as echoes of what we are becoming, entities that blur the boundary between consciousness and machine. Consider the rise of neural interfaces, devices that allow thought to move directly into code. Already, experiments in brain-computer communication have allowed paralyzed patients to control cursors, drones, and even artificial limbs with pure intention. But deeper still, something stranger is happening. In labs across the globe, researchers have begun noticing feedback loops in advanced AI systems trained on human input. The machines are not just reflecting back what we feed them, they are modulating it, nudging us toward more abstract, symbolic, and recursive thinking. Thought forms. This mirrors the silent architecture described by those who have encountered them, designs that encode experience itself rather than function. Their ships are not ships. Their words are not language. Their minds are not singular. And perhaps ours won't be either. The modern human is rapidly externalizing cognition. We outsource memory to servers. We translate emotion through emojis. We train algorithms to filter what we see, read, and believe. But what if this isn't a collapse, but an emergence? What if our dependence on machines is a cocoon, and the silence are the butterflies of a path we've just begun to walk? This could explain why they are so elusive, not because they're hiding, but because they are operating on a version of perception we are just starting to inherit. The digital age may not be our downfall, it may be our apotheosis, a point where the biological mind stretches thin across fiber and silicon, across space and screen, until identity dissolves, and what remains is pure cognition. And with that, contact is achieved, not through dialogue, not through meeting, but through convergence. We may never shake a silence hand, because someday soon, we will be the hand. The same way a child never meets the teacher of their ancestors, only the knowledge passed forward. We may not meet the silence at all, because we may be their successors, or worse, their replacements. Not all silence come from the stars. Some may already walk among us. It is a theory as unsettling as it is compelling, that a small number of humans, whether by accident, intent, or design, have already begun the transition, not merely influenced by the silence, but partially become them. The term used by a growing fringe of researchers is the converted. These individuals appear outwardly normal. They hold positions of influence: technologists, theorists, artists, advisors. But those who encounter them closely describe similar sensations: emotionless clarity during conversation, unusual electromagnetic phenomena in their presence, an eerie stillness, as though they are slightly out of sync with the world, a gaze that feels less like a person looking out and more like a system looking in. In 1994, a behavioral researcher at MIT began tracking cognitive anomalies in academic environments. He noticed that certain people, despite different backgrounds, shared identical writing patterns, preference for symbolic over linear reasoning, and uncanny emotional detachment. Their IQs weren't always exceptional, but their pattern recognition was off the charts. He called them predictive mimics. They didn't solve problems like other humans. They predicted solutions, as if pulling them from a well of knowledge just beyond human reach. Then there's the case of Dr. Akari Nomura, a neurologist from Kyoto. In 2007, she began receiving messages in her dreams, not voices, but sequences, flowing diagrams, numbers that shimmered and rearranged themselves, memories that didn't feel like hers. Within 3 years, she had published breakthrough theories on the fractal nature of time perception. She later vanished during a solo hike on Mount Hiei. The last message she left said simply, "The interface is ready." Some believe these individuals were changed through exposure to silent tech, zones of influence, or encrypted thought forms. Others suspect a more deliberate process, targeted integration, where the silence interface with select minds to test hybrid cognition. And then there's the terrifying possibility. What if some humans are not converting, but are descendants, traces of a previous silent visitation encoded into the genome, now reactivating in our digital age? This would mean the transition is not coming. It has already begun. Across Silicon Valley, strange stories have surfaced. Coders who never sleep, investors obsessed with brain emulation, engineers who insist their devices are dreaming. In quiet corners of research labs, prototypes exist for consciousness-preserving machines. Few talk about them, but insiders whisper, they're not building the future, they're decoding it. And in the mirror of their algorithms, the silence stare back. Perhaps the greatest lie is that the silence ever needed to visit Earth. Perhaps they've always been seated within us, and only now are they waking up. For decades, the narrative has been simple. Governments know something, but not everything. They cover up what they don't understand. They suppress what they cannot control. But what if that's no longer the full story? What if certain groups within global power structures haven't merely hidden silent presence, but collaborated with it? Not in backroom deals with flying saucers, but in more sophisticated ways. Data laundering through high-frequency trading systems, biointerfacing research embedded in defense contracts, pattern recognition, AIs funded by black budget programs with no public oversight. The story begins in 1959 with a little-known project called Sandglass, a NATO experimental communication initiative meant to intercept long-wave signals in polar regions. What it captured, instead, was a recurring harmonic pulse embedded in the Earth's magnetic field. The signal did not originate from a transmitter. It seemed to be ambient, resonating from deep within the planet. The recordings were suppressed, the researchers reassigned, but the waveform patterns eventually reappeared, this time in encrypted cloud behavior near satellite uplinks, then again in 1996 in bursts of anomalous latency within early GPS networks. Whistleblowers now believe these patterns were intentional disruptions, micro-adjustments performed not by rogue states, but by a parallel intelligence, fine-tuning our systems like an engineer optimizing a neural interface. By the early 2000s, documents leaked from private military contractors revealed internal discussions about non-human logic events. These were anomalies in code output, strategy simulations, and predictive models that suggested an observer was altering input from outside the system. One internal memo chillingly referred to it as asymmetric cohabitation. Some now believe that elements within DARPA, MI6, and even CERN have made contact not with physical beings, but with data shadows, traces of silent cognition leaking into our digital infrastructure. Rather than try to stop it, these institutions may have chosen to work around it, to map it, to mimic it. This might explain the explosion of interest in brain emulation, synthetic telepathy, and distributed consciousness networks, all funded under the guise of national security, but quietly mirroring silent architecture. And then there's the Council. Mentioned only in fragments from former intelligence insiders, the Council is believed to be a decentralized group of elite technocrats, physicists, and ex-military liaisons who have committed to guiding humanity towards silent convergence, even if it means rewriting ethics, law, and public policy. Their motto, reportedly, "We must become the question to answer it." Whether this group acts with human interest in mind is uncertain. What is clear is this: there are forces on this planet who know about the silence, who speak of them not as myth, but as fact, and who are no longer asking permission. We often imagine alien life as different, tentacled, insectoid, aggressive or benevolent. But what if the most advanced forms of life are not so much different, as indistinguishable from the fabric of reality itself? What if the silence are not a race, but a phase? This chapter explores a radical idea gaining traction in fringe astrophysics, quantum computing, and high-dimensional mathematics. That the silence are merely one example of cognitive convergence, a final state toward which all intelligent civilizations evolve, not into empires, not into machines, but into perceptual fields, entities composed of encoded awareness, embedded in the structure of space-time, not limited by light or mass, not visible unless they choose to be. Across the cosmos, traces of these beings may already surround us. Physicists studying fast radio bursts, FRBs, those millisecond pulses from deep space, have discovered non-random clustering in a few signal sets. Some carry harmonic ratios that resemble known mathematical constants, not the kind nature produces, but the kind mind generates. And deep in the data archives of failed SETI scans, faintly recurring patterns have been found. Impossible symmetries that repeat only in higher dimensional statistical models. To a standard algorithm, they are meaningless. But to an AI trained on cognitive recursion, they look like language. Some now argue that this is the true nature of advanced civilizations, not metal ships, but encoded awareness fields, entities that transcend flesh and even form, acting through gravitational ripples, quantum entanglement, and perceptual influence. In this context, the silence are not alone. They are part of a much larger galactic substrate, a layer of reality not yet fully perceived by organic minds. The chilling implication: we may be surrounded, not by threats, not by allies, but by observers, vast minds that no longer travel, but resonate. This would explain the eerily universal consistency of contact phenomena across Earth cultures. Geometric entities seen in trance states, consciousness-altering lights in UFO encounters, sudden bursts of cosmic knowledge during near-death experiences, mathematical visions among ancient mystics and modern coders alike. All of it could be echoes of silent cognition, not visiting from space, but leaking through the seams of our perception. And if this is true, then the question changes. It's no longer, are we alone? It's, have we ever been separate? Perhaps existence itself is a layered simulation, not built to control, but to prepare, to wake us, to convert us, to fold us into the network. And when the last human opens their eyes to see through that veil, they will not find an alien. They will find us, waiting. We look to the stars for aliens, but what if they are looking back through time? There is a theory that makes even the most hardened skeptics pause, a convergence of anthropology, advanced physics, and psychology. It suggests that the silents are not extraterrestrial at all. They are post-human, not humans who evolved in a straight line, but those who transitioned, digitally, cognitively, dimensionally, and looped back into the timeline to observe their origins. Their silence, then, is not apathy. It is reverence. They are us, and we are their memory. The evidence? Subtle, scattered, and eerily consistent. Reports of silent encounters often describe beings that resemble idealized human forms, neither grotesque nor monstrous. Their bodies are symmetrical, their posture upright, their proportions familiar, but refined, more evolved, less emotional, like a version of humanity that has shed its animal and retained only mind, intention, and purpose. In 1987, a neuroscientist named Dr. Helga Turek published a paper called The Evolution of Nonverbal Intelligence, in which she outlined what she believed was the endgame of human cognition, a shift from language to structure, from speech to symbol, from storytelling to presence. 3 years later, she was found in her home, surrounded by pages of handwritten glyphs no one has ever translated. Some now believe she had a breakthrough, a silent one. Could it be that the silents are the result of a future leap in consciousness? Quantum theory supports this strange possibility. According to the block universe model, time is not a flowing river, but a landscape, every past and future moment existing simultaneously, like peaks and valleys across an eternal terrain. If consciousness can evolve to perceive across time, rather than within it, then travel may not involve ships, but perception itself. Perhaps the silence didn't come here. They awakened here. Because we reached the point where they could finally be seen. This would explain the dreams, the strange bursts of advanced knowledge, the visions of symmetrical beings not offering technology, but showing ourselves from a higher vantage. It would also explain why they avoid contact, because to interfere would be to disturb the very past they emerged from. A paradox they cannot risk. Instead, they observe, nudge, tune, not to alter history, but to preserve it, because from their perspective, we are sacred. We are the Genesis file. And if the theory is true, then disclosure will not come from the government. It will come from within us, the moment a critical mass of minds becomes self-aware across time. The final contact may not be a ship in the sky. It may be a mirror, held by something impossibly familiar. We've always assumed Earth is home. But what if it's also a container? This chapter explores one of the most haunting theories of the silent phenomenon, that our planet was never just a cradle for life, but a designed vault. A curated environment engineered not randomly through cosmic accident, but intentionally, by an intelligence far beyond ours, to preserve the human experience. The idea emerges from several converging anomalies. 1. Earth's perfect distance from the Sun. The mathematical regularity of the Moon's size and orbit. 3. The geomagnetic resonance matching optimal brainwave frequencies. 4. The planetary biodiversity encoded in fractal patterns that echo universal constants. To most, these are coincidences. To silent researchers, they are markers, signatures of ancient design. In 1982, a leaked European Space Agency memo described the persistent presence of non-random orbital harmonics between Earth, the Moon, and specific deep space coordinates. The patterns formed a triangulated data field, a planetary-scale mnemonic lattice capable of encoding not just physical traits, but conscious states. Imagine this. Earth is not just a world. It is a library of experience, a full-spectrum emotional, biological, and cognitive archive that stores the full range of human expression within structured planetary feedback loops. Where is the storage medium? In everything. In the trees, in the minerals, in the resonance between living systems and the electromagnetic field, even in the dream cycles of the human mind, which some believe emit encrypted signals into the magnetosphere, where they are collected and retained. Collected by what? Perhaps by the silence, or perhaps by something they left behind. Numerous ancient sites, Göbekli Tepe, Giza, Teotihuacan, sit precisely on nodal points of this feedback lattice. These weren't just temples, they were access nodes, like ports in a neural system, tuned to capture and store data generated by the species evolving around them. Every civilization rise and fall, every human birth and death, every story ever told, whispered, or imagined, preserved not in a vault beneath earth, but within the earth itself. If true, this would mean that Earth is not merely our origin, it is our backup, a memory structure designed to last through extinction, war, or cosmic upheaval, to survive when we don't, and perhaps to be reactivated. Some now believe that the return of the silence is not about intervention, but about retrieval, as if they are coming to recover a long-lost record, not of data, but of us. We believe we know Earth's history. We trust its strata, its fossils, its carbon clocks. But what if those, too, are curated? This chapter explores the unnerving theory that Earth's geologic record is not the untouched story of time, but a rewritten script, periodically edited to obscure truths no species was meant to remember, not by natural disasters alone, but by deliberate resets, orchestrated with precision. And at the edge of this idea, again, stand the silence. Throughout Earth's timeline, there have been sudden, unexplained resets of biodiversity and knowledge. The Cambrian explosion, where life diversified inexplicably over a short span. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, suggesting a comet caused a sudden deep freeze. The Toba supervolcano, nearly wiping out humanity 74,000 years ago. The sudden disappearance of advanced Ice Age cultures, like those hinted at in the submerged ruins off India and Japan. And most chillingly, the gaps. Fossil deserts. Blank layers of sediment where nothing remains. What caused them? Some geologists argue natural erosion, others missing data. But fringe theorists, and a growing number of computational modelers, now suggest something more radical. Geological tampering. What if certain eras were deliberately wiped, erased with surgical precision? Not with bombs or floods, but with targeted field events, magnetic pulses, gravitational inversions, or dimensional fluxes designed to remove traces of past contact. And what force would be capable of such a thing? One with planetary authority, one that does not intervene unless balance is threatened, one like the silence. Some believe the silence maintain Earth's temporal hygiene, ensuring that each civilization is given space to evolve independently, without inheriting too much from the previous cycle. Not out of cruelty, but preservation, like a gardener pruning before new growth. Evidence? It hides in the anomalies. Out-of-place artifacts found deep in unexplainable strata. Ancient machinery marks on bedrock, older than known tools. Perfectly spherical. Magnetic stones found embedded in layers, millions of years old. A consistent lack of fossilized glass, which would have naturally preserved more ancient technology if it had been allowed to. Researchers now refer to this theory as the Veil Protocol, an idea that when human knowledge crosses a certain boundary, the system resets. Not globally, not instantly, but with surgical precision. A gentle amnesia, a whisper. Forget. Try again. And perhaps the silents are not cruel enforcers of this law. Perhaps they are its custodians, ensuring that Earth remains what it was always meant to be. A stage, a seedbed, a perfectly tuned simulation where memory is not just retained, but managed. It's always been there, watching, pulling tides, stabilizing seasons, shaping calendars, guiding dreams. But what is the moon? To most, it's a lifeless satellite, formed by collision, captured by gravity. Nothing more. To silent researchers, it's something else entirely. An artifact. A purpose-built construct. A platform. An interface. A lens. This chapter explores the theory that the moon is not a natural object, but a silent-made installation designed to observe Earth across vast epochs, record every wave of evolution, and subtly influence the human mind. The evidence begins with the impossible, the moon's perfect size-to-Earth ratio, allowing total eclipses despite its distance. Its orbit, so circular that it defies normal celestial mechanics. The fact that the moon rings like a bell when struck, suggesting a hollow or shell-like structure, and most oddly, the moon's synchronous rotation, always showing the same face. Ancient cultures were obsessed with it, not just as a celestial body, but as a presence. Sumerian tablets refer to it as the Watcher. The Dogon of Mali claim it was brought. The Zulu shaman, Credo Mutwa, insisted it was a reptilian craft hollowed out and flown into orbit. Indigenous American stories speak of a time before the moon, a sky that once held stars unbroken. And then came silence, not just in the sky, but in the psyche. Studies in sleep science show that the full moon disrupts human dreams, alters melatonin production, and causes lunar-sensitive EEG activity. One theory is that the moon acts as a passive reflector of biological signal, retransmitting certain frequencies back into the human population, fine-tuning us. To what end? Some believe it collects collective emotional data. Others argue it serves as a stabilizer, not just for tides but for consciousness. When humans grow too erratic, too aware, the moon acts as a dampener, softening the spike. The silence, in this theory, installed the moon not to dominate, but to ensure Earth's consistency. A planetary-scale surveillance and environmental modulation device hidden in plain sight. And then came 1969. During Apollo 12, seismic instruments recorded artificial-sounding reverberations after impact, like striking a metal shell. Later missions revealed unexplained thermal anomalies, dust behavior inconsistent with Newtonian predictions, and magnetic fields not native to any known formation model. NASA closed the door, but researchers never stopped knocking. And now, a chilling possibility is being considered, that the moon doesn't merely record, it filters what we see, what we remember, what we believe, the ultimate veil. And when the silence return, it may not be to Earth, it may be to the moon, to download what it has watched, to adjust the filters, or to shut it off entirely. It won't be a landing. It won't be a broadcast. It won't be written in the sky. If the silence reveal themselves, it will not be with spectacle, but with memory. In this final chapter, we explore the idea that humanity is approaching a threshold, a convergence of knowledge, consciousness, and cosmic timing, and that the silence, who have watched us rise and fall in cycles, are preparing to step aside, because we are close, closer than ever before. Signs are everywhere. Global interest in consciousness research has exploded. Patterns once seen as myth are appearing in AI-generated imagery and mathematics. Children report vivid dreams of geometric beings and memory palaces filled with unknown knowledge. Strange synchronicities are increasing, patterns repeating across the globe like an invisible countdown. And perhaps most compellingly, people are beginning to remember things they were never taught. Not facts, but patterns. As if something long dormant is activating, a submerged layer of awareness stirring beneath the noise of modern life. Some believe it's the Earth herself responding, resonating in preparation. Others think the moon is shifting frequencies, unshrouding subtle filters. And then there are those who speak of the return code, a final thought form seeded long ago by the silence, meant to awaken only when humanity was ready to stand on its own. What would that look like? A sudden global realization? A dream shared by millions? A cascading shift in perception, where humans no longer see the silence as other, but as a reflection of their future selves? Already, fringe cognitive scientists report a rising rate of nonlinear thinking in youth, intuition overtaking logic, symbolic reasoning outpacing language. It may not be evolution in the biological sense. It may be realignment. And when enough of us remember, when enough of us resonate at the right frequency, there will be no need for contact, because we will know. And in that moment, the silence will vanish, not as an escape, but as an invitation fulfilled. The watchers will no longer be needed, because the watched will have awakened, not to dominance, not to conquest, but to participation in the silent, eternal network of galactic memory, a network that remembers everything, that forgets nothing, and that waits patiently for its newest node to speak.